Hi, everyone. My name is Aatif Awan. I lead growth team at LinkedIn. I've been doing that for about 4.5 years. And I've seen the company and the team grow a lot in this process. So what I hope to share today is what I've learned from this experience and give a simple framework about how to think about growth. And when you think about growth, there are a lot of anecdotes, and these two are one of the more popular ones. And you've probably heard of that, the first one being how Hotmail, when they started putting a simple signature of get your free email at the bottom of every email in 1997, their growth exploded. They added 12 million members in just 18 months. And this is 1997, so the entire internet was 70 million once you adjust for that. In today's numbers, it means 400 million members. That's faster than any company that exists today. So it sounds pretty incredible, and that's why this gets quoted so often. The other one is Airbnb. When they started, they figured out a way to cross-post on Craigslist without having an API access, and that helped them jumpstart their growth. Both are incredible examples, but the question really is, why not use these tactics to actually grow your product? Nobody really does that, and the reason for that is it's not repeatable. It worked for a very specific product at a very specific point in time, and that was great, but trying to use it today would be similar to using the discovery of penicillin to design the next generation antibiotic program. It just won't work. So what's happened today in the world of growth is that there are lots of anecdotes like this. There are lots of myths. And around that, there are a lot of tactics and theories that are propagated. And that's what generates a lot of hype, and it's best epitomized in the term growth hacking. And I don't like the term. I'm not a fan of it. And what I want to do is go through some of the theories today and quickly tell you why that's not how you should think about it, and then jump to really talking about what growth is. So there are a few interesting, funny fairy tale theories. So first one is the pixie dust theory, which is, hey, take a growth tactic and just sprinkle it on your existing product, and boom, you'll get growth out of that. And I mentioned, like those two tactics, this doesn't work. The second common theory is what I call the Wizard of Oz theory. And that is, hey, go hire a growth hacker, and they'll help you grow. Again, there are some 4,000 plus self-proclaimed growth hackers on LinkedIn. And you don't want to hire any of them, actually, because the best growth people don't use that title on their profiles. And finally, one of my favorites is the Jack and the Beanstalk theory of growth hacking. And that's basically, hey, just keep doing stuff, and somehow or the other, something is going to magically work and you'll grow. And again, that doesn't work. So what is needed instead is a scientific approach to thinking about growth, asking the right questions, and driving your growth strategy out of that. Now, Elon Musk has talked about reasoning from first principles. And that's a great framing. I love it. What happens is that most of us have evolved to think from analogy, and that works. We watch our parents do stuff, our friends and family do stuff, and that's good. It's very efficient. We just learn to do most things in life that way. But it doesn't work when it comes to strategy. And instead of doing that, you need to really boil down the nature of your business, the nature of your product, to the first principles, and then use those first principles to define your strategy. So when we think about these first principles, most of you here are entrepreneurs. You have a startup. You have a product you want to grow. What does success really look like? So it's very simple for me. Startup success is three things. It's product, it's growth, and it's revenue. So what is product? Product is just making something that people want. It's as simple as that. If you have something that people want, you have a compelling product that you'll be able to sell to someone. And then what is growth? It's getting lots of people to actually use that product. So that's where you're scaling it. And then finally, revenue is getting somebody not necessarily your user, but somebody to pay for your product or pay for access to the people using your product. So those are the two, like big ways of making money. Now, some of you are probably thinking, oh, but what about the profit? Because that's what we care about. So profit is just, doing this at a cost that's less than the money you're bringing in. So that's very straightforward as well. Now, when you think about product, that has to come before growth. So you have to create a good product first and then think about growth. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is trying to grow a bad product, because all you'll end up doing is killing it really fast. If you have something bad and you tell everybody about it, they know that it's a bad product, they won't come back and won't use it. And it can seem to work, so that's why you'd say it's so obvious, like why would anybody do it? The problem is if you're not careful in how you define your metric, how you're looking at growth, you'll think about, oh, it's working initially. So the graph on the right I have is this video sharing company from 2012, Vidi, which was dubbed as the Instagram of video. Looked like it was growing very well because you're looking at just your daily active users, and that chart is going up and to the right initially. In the middle of that graph, that's May 2012. But then because people are not sticking around because it's not a good enough product, that wears off, and then pretty soon you'll see the graph undo itself. And it's not just Vidi. This has happened with countless companies, countless products. So you have to be very careful and first focus on the product and then think about growth. So when you think about a good product, how do you know you have one? Good products lead to good retention. That's it. So again, very basic. If people are not coming back again and again to use your product, you do not have retention, you do not have a good product, and nothing else matters. So if you are seeing that in your business, you have to really, really just focus on that. And the graph here, this is hypothetical data, but basically it's a very simple plot. So all you have to do is define some measure of activity. It could be just people who are using your product, but they have to get value out of that. So if you're a messaging app, it's better to use Sense. If you are a photo sharing app, it's better to look at that feature and look at the feature usage rather than just somebody visiting. And then plot that on a cohort basis of saying, since number of days sign up, what percentage of those members have visited, and just see what that looks like over the first month, second month, and see if that line flattens. And if it does, you have a viable product, you have a viable business, you can start thinking about growth. But if it is that second line, the green line, then you don't have good retention, and that means sooner or later that line crosses 0. So basically the people you got, that's what happened to Vidi. The people you got early on, none of them will come back again. So you'll have to continuously keep acquiring these people, but you'll run out of that, and that's why you won't be able to grow. So how do you improve retention? You can do that. So if you are in a situation where your product looks like that green line, and you need to change something, there are 3 things you can do. So first one is you can change your product. So you have to really listen to your users, collect feedback, understand what they like about the product, what are the detractors. There are several methodologies here. You can pick the one that works, but really boil it down to the basics and say, what do I need to do more of, and what are the things that I need to take away from, and what is that core use case that users really value, and just focus on that. And then get another set of users after you've made those improvements, plot your retention again, and see how it is doing. And repeat this cycle until you have good retention. So that's the most common strategy, and that's what you'll end up doing. But in some cases, what you'll find is as you dig deep, that maybe you're going after too broad of a user base. And in that case, a better strategy is to find the segment that really cares about your product and has good retention. And once you've identified that, tailor your product to just that segment and try to achieve product market fit for that segment, because that will ensure good retention. And as long as that segment is large enough, you can grow that. And finally, even if you have good retention, you can always improve it. And basically, that again comes back to what is the core value that your product offers, and how do you get your users to experience that as soon as possible and as early as possible. So at LinkedIn, one of the core values people get out of is by building their network. And what we have seen is that first incremental connection that you get is a huge predictor of longer-term retention. And it's even better if it is an incoming connection request. So it's one thing if I have to go find people, but if I just join and I get connection request from somebody I know and I see the value of LinkedIn through that, that is super valuable. So once we realized that, we basically came up with initiatives to drive more of that behavior, and that led to improvements in the retention of ongoing our new members. And similarly, it's not just for new members. You can look at the people coming back and make sure they are experiencing that value on a repeat basis. So we covered retention. Let's say you have good retention, and now you want to grow. The next step, again, this is where a lot of people would just look at what others are doing and try to replicate somebody else's strategy. But what you really want to do is you want to think about your top metric first. And that is extremely important. You want to have one top metric. You can have other metrics, and you should track that. But you should have one top metric that is aligned with your business, and it is aligned with the value that users receive. So it's measuring some sort of value. It can't be just a business metric, because that won't work. So a great example of this is YouTube. In the early days, YouTube's top metric was number of videos watched. And that sort of aligns with the business, like more videos people watch, more ads YouTube can save, the more money they can make and be successful. The problem with that is that doesn't measure user value accurately. And that led their relevance algorithms to optimize towards shorter and shorter videos. And even people who would watch a video for 30 seconds and drop off because they didn't like it counted as success. So they looked at that, and they realized it, and they changed the metric to minutes watched. And now that's an awesome metric, because the more time people are spending on YouTube compared to TV or Facebook, that's a true measure of them finding value. And that aligns very well with business as well. So think what that metric is for your business. And then as the founders, as the CEOs, as the leads of the growth teams, you are championing that metric. And once you clarify that, then the energy of your entire company and your entire teams can be focused towards that. So that's why you want it to be a single metric. There's one more criteria that I like to see in this metric, that it should be summable. What I mean by summable is that you can have one team which is maybe focusing on just the international expansion, work completely independently. You can have another team that is working on just the new user onboarding, and there can be another team that's working on driving viral growth. And they can work very separately, but they can come up with targets that add up to that single metric, and that allows you to operate much more efficiently. So after you have a metric, you want to figure out what are the best channels you need to focus on to drive growth. And rather than just go with a list of channels and go after the biggest one, really the thing to do here is start thinking about your product and ask some very basic questions. Do people use search to find a solution that your product is relevant to? If so, then it makes sense to look at SEO and SEM as the strategies. So for LinkedIn, that's true. People search is one of the top search categories. And because LinkedIn is about people and the professional profiles, that made SEO a really big channel for us. Another example is, do people already share your product with word of mouth? And if that's happening, you have to go all in on virality. Think about referral programs. Do everything you can to make that process of sharing that product very easy. Are people getting more people on the system? Does that improve the experience for everyone? Are there network effects? If that's the case, again, virality makes sense. So this is not an exhaustive list by any means. But this is to give an idea of what kind of questions you ask, so you can identify the top channels. And for most products, you'll find one channel that's a really big driver, and you continue experimenting with others. Now, once you have identified a channel, you really need to think about what are the levers. So let's say if you have identified virality as a channel, then you have to think about what percentage of your existing members invite others, how many people do they invite on average, and when people who are invited, what's their conversion rate, and so on. So you can identify those levers. If it's SEO, you can think about the top of funnel and like how much traffic you're getting and what kind of conversions. Again, like all those details about the channels, there is tons of information on that. Like you can easily construct that. But the really important thing is to pick the right channel, identify the levers together with the team, and then growth really requires this continuous prioritization and learning and feedback cycle. So you come up with a unit of execution, which could be like a couple of weeks is a pretty good cadence, and you could have larger for your quarterly planning as well. But for each like cycle, you are doing reprioritizing. You're saying, okay, this cycle we want to focus on just the conversion optimization, or this cycle I want to do focus on driving the top of funnel, and prioritize your channels and levers as the first step in there. And then you want to brainstorm hypotheses as the second step. So what are the things, like why do people invite others? So I think like asking those questions is really important versus just trying to say, oh, I'll change the color of a button, or I'll test a bunch of different copy, and use that to drive some hypothesis about what would make people share more in the virality example. And have a list of these hypotheses and ideas. And at the brainstorming stage, you don't care about impact. It's just about let's get some creativity going and get as many ideas as possible. And the next step is assessing impact. So for each of the ideas, you want to look at your growth model and say, oh, this will move this lever this much, which indirectly feeds into my top metric, and it will move it by this much. So you have a good sense of what are the biggest ideas. And you want to do this even before you think about whether an idea is, how expensive an idea is, which is going to be the next step. Because like you want to not even invest the energy in having your engineering team prioritize all of those ideas yet. So once you have identified a set of top ideas, you go and you prioritize. And you prioritize, you have to look at three sides of this equation. So there is the impact that you already did. There is a likelihood of those materializing. So what's your confidence level in that idea? And that's a really good filter. When you start off, like working on these things, your batting average is really low. So you're like, oh, maybe 1 in 3 ideas hits, and it gets better over time. You develop an intuition, so you kind of bake that in as a probability of that idea actually having the impact that you thought it would. And then finally, there is the engineering effort, and you can use those three things to come up with a very specific prioritized backlog that you can always be adding to. And the next step is just building it, experimenting, learning from that. And that's very crucial. Like when you're small, just, you don't need a strong experimentation framework, but just make it scientific. Just have a control group and a treatment group. When early days of LinkedIn, we did not have an experimentation framework. What we were doing was we're looking at the member ID, and we were just saying, oh, if it is, last digit is 8, put them in this treatment. If the last digit is 7, put them in this treatment. So that's how basic it gets, and you can all do that. But today, we have a very sophisticated experimentation platform that's built in-house. We do, like hundreds of experiments every week, and that is really, really key. And from those experiments, you learn, and you come back to the beginning of the cycle, and now you have learned something else. So that helps you with prioritization, and that helps you with hypothesis generation, and so on. So that continuous process is really important. So I'll wrap up with 2 things. So hiring is really important. And you have to really think about who are the people you want to be on your growth team. Jack Welch says that it's much more important to get the right people in the right jobs than what your strategy is. And I've internalized that over experience as well, that you want the right people in the team because strategies will change. It's much harder for your teams to change and evolve. It's much harder to correct a bad hiring mistake. So the things we look for and things you should think about are, one, like people on the growth team or people who are responsible for growth have to be extremely analytical. They have to be comfortable with data. They have to be able to analyze trends. They have to be able to use those patterns and trends in the data to actually draw conclusions by themselves. They should know how to get shit done. That's the most underrated thing. But it's really, really important, like a lot of people would know how to talk the talk, but they cannot get stuff done. And with growth, the faster you move, the more experiments you've done, the more stuff you get out there, the faster you learn, and the more competitive advantage you have. So this is super important. They have to be curious, right? So just don't take something as a fact because you heard from someone. They have to ask why. Why are users acting a certain way? Why are people not getting our product? Why do they drop off so quickly, and so on? And they have to be able to find new ways to do things. So also ask why not, in addition to asking why. And a great example from just this month in our team was where we have, I mentioned SEO is important for us. So we have this public profile where, like it's searchable on Google and other search engines. And that's tied to another product within the company. And that meant we had to release only once every 2 to 3 weeks. And the team wanted to move much faster. And they questioned that assumption of, like those being tied and asked, why not just separate that? And it's not obvious, in hindsight, it's like, oh, that was great. But most people won't ask that. They're like, oh, 3 weeks, that's what it is. And we decoupled it, and now you can launch any time. But not only that, a really nice side benefit of that is that as part of decoupling, pages are much more lighter weight. So we actually improved our site speed and performance for that by 30%. And that usually means better conversions and higher growth. So that's where, like challenging assumptions and coming up with new ways to doing things is really important. And the final point here is prior growth experience is optional. So you don't have to go looking for people who like have done growth. I think there are very few people who have done that at meaningful scale, and it's hard to hire them. As long as you are looking for those traits, you can build this. Like even at LinkedIn, like I think a majority of my team, I have hired people who have not done growth experience. They've turned out to be really, really amazing people at growth. So like that's a very common mistake people do, but just be more open about it. And there are certain backgrounds that are very useful, so search and advertising that require that kind of analytical work. So look for evidence of that skill set, but not necessarily prior growth experience. So this is just an example of how LinkedIn's growth team is structured. When you're small, you're as a founder, you have to think about the growth itself. At some point, you scale enough to maybe hire a growth product manager. And another point is it's not just one person who has to be the marketer and data scientist and programmer and have this like mythical growth hacker. Like it's a team effort. So think about what skill sets your team has, what you need. Generally speaking, like growth strategy is really important. So hiring your first hire, having that as a PM, I believe is important. And as the team scales, so LinkedIn team right now, growth team, it is north of 110 people. And we divide it in these 4 groups. So we have the SEO team, which is focusing on all the public content, making it discoverable through search and conversion optimization. We have the network growth team, which includes products like People You May Know, how to get people to build their networks and connect with others. We have the onboarding team, which is really, really important. When I talked about the aha moment, this is the team kind of focuses on that and makes sure users are set up for success on LinkedIn and understand the value of LinkedIn. And then finally, we have a team dedicated to driving engagement through email and push channel and focusing on bringing back dormant members. So that's just to give an idea of how big a growth team can get over time and how meaningful impact it can continue to have across your business. Finally, culture. So culture is really, really important. You have to instill, as you grow and as you bring on new people onto the growth team, but also generally in the company, you have to really keep some values fresh and make sure people are really driving by those values. So the top ones for us, are setting ambitious goals is really important. You'll reach only as high as the goals you set up for yourself. So very important that you continuously push the team and the rest of the company to come up with large goals and then find ways to achieve them. Moving fast, very, very important. And I think like you have to make that a cultural value and make sure that your investments, you're continuously investing in actually making the team move fast. And it's okay if as part of that, like you make mistakes, you learn from them and move on. Data trumps opinion, very important. I think a lot of the time people get into these endless debates about oh, but I think this is true, or no, I think this is why users are doing. You should just look at, like get your experimentation cost down to so much and get your cost of answering these questions from data you already have down so much that you don't have to waste any time on those opinions. You should be able to get the data. And that's a much better way of learning about your users than just thinking about it. Continuous learning. Again, I reiterated in the cycle, but we treat that as a value. We're always, like we do ask when we are coming up with ideas, like what will we learn from that? And that's an important thing I like to emphasize. And then finally, celebrate your wins. So at LinkedIn, like from the very early days, we've celebrated member milestones. I think that's instilled, like a sense of pride in growth and across the company. And we've done that, when we were 100,000 and members in just a small employee set, to the last milestone of 300 million, where just the people in Bay Area were about a couple thousand. But we always get together in our courtyard, do this awesome picture with how many members we have, and then we go and celebrate afterwards. And now that we're an international company, actually people are taking this tradition, and we are getting pictures from all our international offices, which is really awesome to see as well. So to sum up, I hope that I have shared some questions and like a framework that allows you to think for yourself versus just looking at what others are doing. And hopefully that sets you up to think about your products and grow them and be more successful. Thank you.